come.
God bless you.
You're yet holding on?
I'm yet holding on.
All right.
God bless you. Good morning, everybody. Amen. Good to be here this morning. Good to see each one of you. If you have your Bibles, turn with me, please, to 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter. So this is, Corinthians, the church at Corinth. These were new believers. And as always, with anything, when you're involved with people, you're going to have some who are stronger than others and some who are weaker than others. So there were questions that the church had, and they wrote to Paul to get some clarity on these questions.
Lady Deborah, could you clarify what you mean by stronger?
And what I mean by that is in faith, if you will. Stronger in faith, some weaker in faith. Everybody's saved. Some just on some things they have a better understanding, if you will.
Oh, in fighting the good fight of faith?
Yes.
Some give up.
Yes.
And some hold on.
Yes.
Okay.
And then and again, as I said, in understanding, sometimes there are some things, especially what we're talking about today. We're talking about liberty. And there's some things that people have a better understanding and are more comfortable with than others. So
Let me ask you this. Do you think that a key component in getting an understanding is being diligent? Because there's evidence of laziness. Like we passed by this house that's right next to ours, and just the filth and in the bad shape that it's in. To me, that's evidence of laziness. You won't take the time. Just like around the house, it gets in them. If you keep putting things off, then there's evidence of it. You lay things down, you don't pick it up, you put it, I get it later, and whatever. And so I think what I need to strive for is to be diligent in everything, but we're talking about the Word of God now. If I neglect the Word of God, then my faith begins to wane.
yes, absolutely, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing the Word of God. So absolutely, so.
One other thing, I find that it's very easy to deceive myself about my strength. I just in my mind I'm strong.
Oh yeah.
Until the test comes, and then I understand really. Sometimes I think God allows tests to come in my life to show me where I am. I used the example like in the first year of law school. In law school, that's the first time I ever been in a school where you only have one test a semester. So all semester, everybody seemed like they smart, everybody doing the same until the test come. And the test separates. The test separates. And so I guess that's when the Bible tells me, take heed of yourselves. Because I just think that as a human being, I'm so full of myself, my ego, comparing myself with other people and things.
Absolutely.
When I was drinking, when I was drinking, I used to love to find companions of a lower stature, people that wasn't trying to do nothing. But I would, even though I was working, I go find people that didn't have no job, so they make me feel good about myself, tell me about how wonderful I am and things like that, so that I would get a false sense of security. And I just think that the world and just, like I said, me, if I'm not very careful, because in a man's eyes, everything he do is right in his own sight. And that's what's so dangerous about a person who doesn't have humility and won't listen to anybody else. Go ahead.
No, good, great observations. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Okay, so some of the questions that they had that they wanted answers to, because there was confusion about these particular issues that they had. And some of the confusion would lead to the division that they had in the church. So when you have stronger people who feel like there's nothing wrong with what they were doing, if you understand what I'm saying, and then you have those who are stepping back and saying, no, you shouldn't be doing that. But they hadn't come to the understanding of that, then that causes division. So they had questions about marriage. They had questions about food that had been sacrificed to idols. They had questions about spiritual gifts, questions about the resurrection of the dead, and questions about the missionary offering that was being collected for the Jews. And so in chapter 7, apparently, one of the questions was, is celibacy or remaining unmarried, is it more spiritual than marriage? Mother Bland, there's one of your students. She can't hear me. Touch her, Jay. Let her know. Okay. So apparently, celibacy, remaining unmarried, that was one of the questions. Or are they more saved, or are they more spiritual than those who are not? And the thing about it, though, let's look at this. Now, concerning the things whereof ye wrote unto me, is it good for a man not to touch a woman? Celibacy, remain unmarried. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. So, benevolence. Do benevolence. And so Paul replied that it's good for a man or a woman to have the gift of celibacy. That's a gift. If you can remain unmarried and do what you have to do, because surely, and I think those of us who are married can attest to the fact that before we were married, we had more freedom to do things that we wanted to do. But once you become married, you don't have that type of freedom as you would. You know what I'm saying? Because you got other things that you have more responsibilities and things you have to look at to make sure that things get taken care of. Whereas before you got married, you only had yourself to worry about.
I think, Lady Deborah, that, and I think what you're talking about is sex, that I noticed that Paul and Jesus were, as far as we know in the Bible, celibate. And I think that sex complicates sin. It's the line between sex and sin, even in Christian sex, Christian marriage. You know what I'm saying? I know when we first got married, after we were saved, we were trying to be romantic, listening to Lee Williams, because we thought it was a sin to listen to Keith Sweat and listen to the worldly music and stuff. And so it just complicates, even during the act, and you're married, what do you say? Do you use profanity? Do you not? And I get that, and I just thank God for your teaching. I'm getting a lot out of this, more than I got out of it, I guess, when I read it on my own. That is celibacy better in a way? Well, it's good if that's your gift.
If that's your gift.
If you can do it, but if you can't do it, then
you need to get married.
I'm just glad to come to a place of honesty to understand that this is a problem area in my Christian walk, because it gets so frustrating because you're trying to be perfect, you're trying to do everything right, and it's just good to discuss, and it's just so much that I don't worry about now since I'm at Manassas that used to just frustrate me and they think, well, am I ever going to get it right? That's all.
So he says then, is speaking to your comments, for I would, in verse 7, that all men were even as I myself. But every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner and another after that. And y'all, we know ourselves. We know ourselves. We know ourselves. And so he says, I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. Because the fact of the matter is, marriage absolutely does convolute everything, you know. It absolutely does. Because you, again, as I said last Sunday, you have two people now. And the two become one. To become one. And sometimes that's not always easy. Sometimes that's not always easy.
And I think the church has been an instrument of confusion because we've been like ostrich with his head in the sand, and they just tell us to do. You tell us to do, but you give us really no practical instructions. And then the thing about it is that our leaders have set themselves up on some type of pedestal where, you know, I don't feel comfortable talking to you about something you talking about you ain't never had no problem with. You know, I mean, our leader told us, well, he said it from the pulpit one time, said me and my wife ain't never had no argument. And I just shut him off. I can't relate to you. We just got through fussing.
No, it's so true. So true. And so he says, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry. They cannot contain. If they cannot contain, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn. Burn what? Burn in hell? Burn with lust. Burn with lust. Again, I say, as I said last Sunday, we are grown. We all have desires. We were made that way.
And Lady Deborah, you could even see with the Catholics where they don't allow their priests to marry. Well, you know, who is it that don't need? You know what I mean? And so what you end up with is you end up with people that don't need a woman. They with men anyway, and then they start molesting children. And so it's just. The Bible is right. And
so they had also asked about divorce. And so you know, Jesus when he was teaching, he taught about a divorce. And so some of this that Paul is reflecting on and sharing with them, you can kind of tell comes from the things that Jesus taught. And so he says, husbands and wives are not to divorce each other. Go look at, stay in that same chapter and look at 1 Corinthians 7:39. The wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will only in the Lord. And so, you know, as much as possible, then you try to reconcile. You try to be reconciled with each other as much as possible. We know in this day and time, there are so many different things and so many different reasons for married people to be divorced. A lot of different reasons. Sometimes the reasons are valid reasons, sometimes not so valid. If you get just tired of somebody, you know what I'm saying? And that happens more often than not. Y'all, the divorce rate is sky high. And it's only sky high because, you know, sometimes you don't want to be with them anymore. And so you just that's it is what it is. You know what I mean? But reconciliation, if it's possible, that's a good thing. Okay, so let's just see. Let's go back over to where were we? 1 Corinthians 7. So you had some who were saved and some who were not saved. They were married to unsaved people. You know, he got saved and married to unsaved people. So now what should I do? He's not saved. Should I leave him? Should I leave them or should I stay? And so that would be hard, especially if they were having a hard time at home, because if you have someone who's saved, someone who's not saved, that's automatic friction, if you will. In my mind, that's automatic friction, because you're gonna believe different things.
Well, it was hard on me till you got saved.
That tickle you, Jeff. That tickle you, Jeff. But yeah, okay. So let's just use us as an example. Let's just use me and Pastor Bland as an example, and that's true enough. The Lord, thank God, the Lord saved him. So my thing was, because as he testified so often, we were buddies in the truest sense of the word. We were drinking buddies, we were get high buddies, we were buddies. We were buddy in the truest sense. And so when the Lord saved him, we weren't buddies like that anymore. And I'm looking at him like I was appalled. I was appalled. So what I want to say to you is, and I did say this to him, I knew the Lord before you did, and you trying to tell me, we used to have some knockdown dragouts. We used to have some knockdown dragouts. So it was friction. And then when I want to do something that he felt was ungodly, friction. It's friction. It's friction up in the house. And so these were the same things that they were going through here in the church at Corinth. And so, they want to know then, so what should we do? So in chapter 7 and verse 12, but to the rest speak I, not the Lord. Speak I, not the Lord. Let me just tell you what I want to say. This is my judgment. If any brother hath a wife that believe not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which hath the husband that believe not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy? But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. And in either situation, God has called us to peace, period. God has called us to peace. And it's not, you don't beat the person up. You don't beat the person down. You are, your salvation is not dependent on that, And so, if anything, it ought to, because you have someone who is saved, it ought to it should make it better. It should. But, if you're just into yourself and you're being selfish, then it is what it is. So suppose the unsaved mate leaves the home in 1 Corinthians 7 and 15. The Christian partner is not obligated to keep the home together. We're called to peace, and we should do all we can to live in peace. That's it every day. But there comes a time in some situations when peace, y'all, is just not possible. Sometimes peace is not possible. And so he goes into greater detail about must Christian get married. And so Paul asked them to consider several things when he talked to them about this. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, in verse 16, for what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband? Or how knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? But as God has distributed to every man, as the Lord has called every one, so let him walk, and so ordain I in all churches. Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of God. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. Art thou called being a servant? Care not for it, but if thou mayest be made free, use it rather. For he that is called in the Lord, being a servant, is the Lord's free man. Likewise also he that is called, being free, is Christ's servant. And he always brings them back to this point. Ye are bought with a price. You are bought with a price. Be not ye the servants of men. Okay, and so must you get married. Now, concerning virgins, I have no commandment of the Lord, yet I give you my judgment, as one that hath attained mercy of the Lord to be faithful. I suppose, therefore, that there is good for the present distress, I say, that it is good for a man so to be. So he's telling them, look at the present situation. I don't really know what the situation was at Corinth right then, but probably pretty stressful under different things going on, the political environment at that time, the social environment at that time. So then one thing you have to consider is looking at the situation. Look at the situation. And when you look at the situation, you look at it with open eyes. You know, you don't want to go into anything blindly. I had a friend who was proposed to and ended up getting married. But before she got married, Tara, there's a thing that we call red flags. So let's just talk about red flags for a moment. What would some red flags be to y'all? To you, Brother Jeff, what would maybe a red flag before you got married that you might notice about the person that you are contemplating marrying?
Quitting a job.
Quitting a job. Being dishonest. So, okay.
I think dishonest is a big one. If they start lying to you already and y'all not even joined together and you still lying.
Infidelity, okay. So, and that's part of probably dishonesty and infidelity go together. And then quitting a job or can't keep a job. Okay. Yeah, and I think I heard you say abusive language. Okay.
A woman, you can't help that, bad attitude. But anyway,
Controlling.
can't help that either. I have to keep going back to, I have to go back to the dishonesty thing because nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. You ain't gonna marry the perfect person. And if y'all can't come to the truth, in other words, if I'm hiding from you, you know, because when you get married, you don't really know what you're getting. It's going to be some surprises anyway. Yeah. But to a certain degree, I want to know who I'm marrying. You know, I tease my mama all the time. I tell her, she said, "Savannah, you crazy." I said, "Well, I'm the only child you really know. The rest of them putting on the front around you." And so to a certain degree, if I'm going to do this, if I had to do this again, I would be looking for, do I really know this person? You know what I mean? Because, I mean, it's easy. You want to, of course, you're going to try to put your best foot forward when you know, and everything. But to a certain degree, you know, I'm grown. I need to know who this is, what it's going to be when after the honeymoon over with. After we quit grinning at each other and all this, and these bills start coming in, and my mama gets sick, and we got to do this. I want to see what kind of person you're gonna be then.
So in other words, then there's nothing wrong with looking and checking it out. So if you have red flags, they're there for a reason, and it's better for you to know on this side. If you than to get on this side and then say,
the big problem that you have is that when you just want something. I wanted some tennis shoes, and so I'm ordering. And Lady Deborah said I always overdo. I'm gonna order some tennis shoes. So instead of me ordering one, and she noticed the truth. Instead of me ordering one pair, I order 5 pair. Okay. But first, my credit card sends me a thing saying, "Did you do this?" Yes, I said yes, and everything. So it's supposed to have been gone through. Then the company, Saks, sends me an email, confirm your order, on the way, be here in 2 or 3 days. I'm just as happy as I can be. I'm getting what I want. Then they send me another one saying, your order has been canceled. I'm working all that day. Lady Deborah, we riding trying to go to West Memphis and everything. I'm on the phone trying to get them to take my money. And I had her, hold on, you got to pull over to the side because I'm going to lose my signal. Still, it didn't work. And then finally, last night, I started to do it again. And you know what I realized? I don't even really want them. My problem is, look how she looking. Shoe PM, that's all I got to say, shoe PM. Okay.
No, 6 p.m.?
6 p.m., whatever it is. The way she justified Jeff is that, well, I don't pay that much for mine, but you got 190 pounds. But the thing I have to watch out for is my will instead of God's will. And I finally just yielded and said, well, God, maybe it's not your will for me to get these tennis. And that happens to me sometimes. Sometimes I try to make something happen, and it just won't happen. And it's God's way of intervening in my will. And even though, Lady Deborah, I might see the red, I've had friendships like that. I've had friendships that went on for 10, 15 years, and all the red flags was there. I was always the one giving. I was always the one trying to find and make sure they were okay and everything. And then finally one day I had to realize, and I told this guy that one day I told him, I said, you know what? Because he told me about how he was with somebody and they were saying something derogatory about me. He kind of laughing about it. And I said, well, let me ask you this. How is it that you felt comfortable, or did they feel comfortable about saying that about me around you? And I said, I tell you what, I said, you lose my number. And he couldn't believe it. He could not believe it. Sometimes he would text me 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and tell me, man, I miss us. And I asked Lady Deborah, I said, was I going with him or was he going with me? Who does that? Who texts a man at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? But, until he died, he could not understand why I didn't feel about him. Like you said, I guess I loved him and everything, but I finally recognized the red flags.
Yeah.
This is no good for me.
Yeah, you have to be willing to see that. And so if not, then you're going to, ultimately do some things that you're going to regret. And then you start to feel bad about yourself because then you start saying, why didn't I? Or if I had only. So a lot of times when we're talking about marriage, if you will, and for those of you who are not married, listen, every situation is unique. So here are some reasons that you shouldn't rush into it. And I know you could add to this list. So have you heard someone say, well, everybody else is married and I'm not? Yeah. Especially if you're running in a circle. And everybody's married. Everybody's married and I'm not. And for women, I'm not getting any younger. Another thing you hear them say, well, my biological clock is ticking. And so, it's just, y'all, that's just something you shouldn't force. Let me just say it like that. Marriage is something that you shouldn't force. You shouldn't force. You should allow God to work it out. God work it out. And just when you get your mind off of it, I believe that's when someone will show up. When you take the pressure off of yourself and take the pressure off of the situation and not do it just because.
And Lady Deborah, it doesn't have a chance if the person doesn't love you. And by love, what I mean is that they have the ability to put your interest before theirs. Yeah. If they don't have that, either you're just going to be used the whole time or you're going to end up getting tired of it. You see? I'm just tired of this.
And so good point. Good points.
One other thing that no way that I would have paid any attention to when I got married. If everybody that love you is telling you this ain't no good for you, you might want to look at it. You might want to look at it.
Yeah, you might want to. You might want to. So, because I'm like this, and marriage is, I love the idea of marriage. I love the institution of marriage. I think it's a beautiful thing. I said that. I think it's hard work. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Because it's not something that just happens. If you're in any relationship, it's not going to just happen, especially if you have a vision for what you want it to be. You have to work at it. And it takes more than one person to work at it. Everybody got to work at it. Everybody has to work at it. And so I was like this, and when I got married, I'm like, this is it. I don't plan on marrying anybody else. This is it. And if you look at it like this is not just a trial, because that's what happens. That's what happens. When people are marrying now, they're saying, okay, well, I can always, just like I got this one, I can get another one. They come a dime a dozen. And so it's built on, you have to build the marriage, and Pastor Bland says this all the time, but you have to look past how they look. You have to look past their bank account. You have to look past your romantic idea of what it should be, because I did have a romantic idea in my mind about what it should be, and it did not turn out to be that. It did not. It did not turn out to be that. You have to look past the social acceptance. You have to look past all of that, and then you have to have an honest moment with yourself. Am I willing to work on this relationship to make it what I want it to be?
And you was talking about social acceptance. I can honestly say this morning that, I could care less what society thinks about our marriage. I could care less about what your family or my family think about our relationship. And I just think you have to get to that place, because if you bring in these other factors and whatever, you're going to have some trouble.
So, okay, to speak to your point, commitment, some character, some maturity, because y'all, it takes it to growing way. When I got married, I was grown, but I was so immature. I was so immature, and still am to certain points and certain things. And so it's a growing way. It's a growing way, but you have to allow yourself to be made open and vulnerable, transparent, and willing.
But like you said, it takes two. One person can't do that.
Yeah.
Because if it's not two, once you become vulnerable, they're going to use that opportunity just to take you out. Because they don't feel that way about you.
Yeah.
But if they love you, and the thing about, we in love and we married and we Christians and all that, well, love doesn't come from us. The Bible says that love is the fruit of the Spirit. And so then if I'm living a spiritual life, then I'm walking in love. It's not that I'm saved and not saved. That's kind of like the problem that people have sometimes. Well, if they're both Christians, why are they having this problem? Well, we're just like everybody else. But we're different when we are walking in the Spirit. When we're living a spiritual life, the fruit of the Spirit is love, and then I have the ability to put your interest before mine. If I'm not walking in the Spirit, that love, if I'm in carnal in me and everything, I'm selfish. All I can see, Cynthia, is what you ain't doing, what you're not doing that I want you to do. And I'm telling everybody that I see, and they're spreading my business all around, and I'm telling folk, he this, he that, and everything. Next thing you know, they with him. She just don't know what to do with him.
So to close this out then, for married couples, for those of us who are married, we have to have the willingness to grow and learn from each other. From each other. And sometimes that's hard. And I would say this for women. I would just say this for women. It's hard for us sometimes because we're smarter than men.
Well, you can look around the room and see how many women are here and not men for that to be evident.
And so
it ain't enough men that got no sense to be here.
So it's hard. It's hard for us. And you know, I say that tongue in cheek, but I also, you know, there's a large sense of truth to that, because you know, we just have, God gave us an innate discernment of how to do some things to help to keep our home together. Now, I believe in God's order of things. I believe that the man is the head of the household. I honestly believe that. And I believe when that's out of order, I believe everything's out of order. And it becomes even more evident because as the woman, we want to rush in to save everything. We want to rush in to save because we can see it falling apart. We can see it falling apart. And I have walked through that house so many times, just wanting to say something, and just walking on off, just letting it go, because it's not gonna make the situation any better. It's not gonna make the situation any better. So, but if we just remember though that even when the head is out of kilter, we can learn from each other, and it helps the marriage to become stronger.
Let me say this for men. There is a certain humility. If you're ever going to be great, now, and God has been showing me the difference between being gifted and being great. You can be gifted and still don't come to anything. But as men, if we're ever going to be great, there's a certain amount of humility that we have to attain to in order to save the body. You know, the Bible talks about, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, that even though he was in the form of God, he thought it not robbery. He humbled himself. And Bible talks about submitting yourself one to another. And if we are equally yoked, joined together, there's a certain humility that I have to have. And I'm glad that we didn't start pastoring at 20, at 30. That God knew the right time, where that I see so many pastors that try to shut their wives down in order to show that they are the head. But if you are something, you don't have to. You don't have to do that. And so God has given your mate as a helpmeet. You're supposed to be. My God, you're supposed to be celebrating her. You're supposed to be making her just all that she can. You're not supposed to be threatened and insecure because she has gifts or because she can do something better than you. Because, and say this, I'm going to be through. I am a firm believer that we all be better if we could get out of our ego and let each part, Paul talks about 1 Corinthians 12 about the body. Each part has. If we let each part do what, because then the whole body is going to be benefited. It's not about you. It's all about everything being done to the glory of God. And so I'm just so glad that just today that I understand how that I have to have a certain amount of humility and not to be threatened. You see what I'm saying? If the woman too much for you, you need to leave her alone. You see what I'm saying? But and I really understand. I'm really more committed to this, Deborah, since your mother passed, because your mom and dad gave you to me. They nurtured you, and they did all they could to help you to get where you were. And it was hard for them to give what they had worked over to me. And I fumbled, messed it up and whatever. God gave me time. And I'm committed this morning. And now that your mother and father are gone and everything, to even more. But that's going to take humility. That's going to take not thinking that I know what to do and being led by God's Spirit. I think God's Spirit will take us to a place we're trying to get, Jeff, for that marriage that okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the same thing, and I see you, Brother Alex, the same thing goes for us as women. It takes humility for us because, you know, we want to show many times that we are, you know, that we can do it better. We want to show that that's like, that ain't gonna work. We want to let them know that. We want to let them know. We want to let them know that. So it takes humility for us not to say everything that we feel. Now, I'm talking to myself right now, for real, though. I am. It's a hard thing to do. Because everything that comes to your head, you want to verbalize it. But y'all, it's a wise woman who builds up her house. It's a wise woman who builds up her house. But a foolish woman tears it down with her own hand. And so we're wise women, and we're wise builders. And then Brother Alex.
I'm going to give it to Brother Alex.
Okay, and we're going to end on his
But if you
point.
got the right woman, it makes no difference that she makes more money than you make. It makes no difference that she's got a higher education that you got. She still honors you as her husband and as the head. And you have to be secure enough within yourself. You know, a lot of, especially black women, have problems when they are excellent of finding a mate who won't try to keep them down or who is not threatened by, you know, by their level of educational attainment or their intelligence. That's not threatened. They have a hard time. And I think that we as men should commit to putting our little ego in our pocket and don't let it be a liability to the woman that she loved you. Let it be a blessing that she loved you and that you're not ever going to try to hold her down, but you're going to be her main cheerleader.
Yeah, as you're passing that to Brother Alex, we help to build each other up. We build each other up.
Pastor, you and Lady Deborah, you know, I didn't need the mic no more because you just said what I was going to say. But our biggest fault as far as black men are concerned is our insecurity and our egos, like Pastor said. And you have to have a certain amount of humility. And like he says, you have to celebrate this beautiful, black, strong woman. Because that's what they are. They've held up this America, believe it or not. Black women. And like I say, I pay homage to everyone, each and every one, every time, now that I've been saved.
Yeah, and Mother Minnie has something, Pastor, if you could come up here. You know, and we could say the same thing, Brother Alex. It just works for both of us because, you know, men have a heart. Men have a hard time. They do. They have a hard time. But when they come home, they should be celebrated. They should be celebrated. Yes.
No, I just wanted to say way back years ago when they started talking about women's lib.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? And I said, well, I won't use the terms that I use, but I said, I don't give a, I said, wait a minute, not bad. I don't give a hoot about women's lib because I had no trouble doing what I needed to do. I was never hindered or tried to be kept from what I needed to do. So why should I worry about women's lib? That was not my thing, and so I felt good about that.
Yeah, you were blessed. You were blessed, but you know, in globally, you were just blessed. You were blessed because typically that's not what happens. That is not what happens, which is why that had to come to the forefront. Right now, if you look at it, just read about it, look at it. We're still not paid what we're worth. We're not paid for what we're worth. We're not given a credit for what we know. And so you are blessed. But in the bigger scheme of things, that does not happen. That does not happen. And so we're still fighting for equal rights of sorts, if you will, and
Sure.
gender equality.
Black men were given the right to vote 50 plus years before women. And we understand today, if you don't have a vote, you don't have a say so. You don't even count.
Absolutely.
Who cares how you feel about something if you don't get to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a good place for us to point. Great discussion this morning. We will pick up with Chapter 8 next Sunday. Absolutely.
Never got that out of 1 Corinthians.